Ethan Cole braced himself in the dusk, blood seeping from a gash in his shoulder. Only one bullet remained in his revolver. He planted his boots firm in the muddy yard, shielding his trembling new bride behind him. A ring of armed Kincaid kin closed in around them. Their gun barrels glinted in the last light of sundown. The sun was almost gone, time nearly up. Ethan had sworn never to shoot again, and now a single shot was all he had. Would he break his sacred vow to save her land? How in blazes did a quick wedding just yesterday lead to this deadly standoff? Ethan Cole first laid eyes on Clara Kincaid at high noon in Dust Creek's Mercantile. She was cornered against a stack of flour sacks by a burly man snarling about an unpaid debt. He spat that no man would marry a girl with no dowry, and that her father's homestead would be forfeit by sundown if she stayed unwed. Clara's eyes darted in panic as a few townsfolk watched. Ethan's gut clenched at the injustice. He had come for nails and salt, not trouble, but trouble found him anyway. Without thinking, Ethan stepped forward. "Take your hands off her," he said, voice low and steady. The man sneered, tightening his grip on Clara's arm. In that breathless moment, Clara suddenly blurted, "He'll marry me. Right now." Her words hung in the air, stunning them both. Every eye in the store turned to Ethan. The weight of this choice bore down on him, but seeing Clara's desperation, he gave a firm nod. Within the hour, they stood before Pastor Abram at the little clapboard chapel on the edge of town. The scent of wild sage drifted on the breeze as Clara clasped Ethan's work-roughened hands. She had no kin by her side, just a crumpled land deed in her pocket and hope in her eyes. In a few hurried vows under the baking sun, they became husband and wife. Ethan offered a gentle, reassuring smile as she trembled with nerves. As dusk fell, Ethan and Clara stepped off the chapel porch, married and bound by fate. She allowed herself one relieved breath, but that peace shattered with a distant horn blast echoing from the hills. Clara went pale. The Kincaid clan already knew. Ethan's pulse quickened at that haunting call in the twilight. Had they just won Clara's freedom or sealed their doom? CTA. Keep watching to see how Ethan and Clara face the gathering storm. Ethan led Clara onto his buckboard wagon as the sun dipped below the horizon. The wagon creaked forward, harnesses jangling in the empty street. Clara fidgeted with her shawl, eyes scanning the darkening plains. In the distance, dust plumes rose. Riders were coming fast. The Kincaid clan had caught their scent and was closing in. Clara's breath hitched at the growing thunder of hooves. "We have to reach the farm before they do," Ethan hissed, urgency in his voice. He snapped the reins, and the wagon jolted onto the road out of town. As they raced into the twilight, the sour odor of fear mingled with Clara's rosewater perfume. She clung to Ethan's arm as the wheels bounced over ruts. Hoofbeats thundered closer with each passing minute. A knot tightened in Ethan's gut. At best, they had an hour before the posse caught up. His farm was 5 miles out through a narrow canyon. Coyotes yipped in the distance, their howls riding the rising wind like a bad omen. "I'm sorry you got involved," Clara whispered, voice shaking. A tear slipped down her cheek. Ethan gave her a small, reassuring smile, hiding his own dread. "No one deserves to be at the vulture's mercy," he said quietly. Would this act of kindness cost him everything? He felt the heavy weight of his father's pocket watch in his coat. Each tick of it felt like a countdown. They rounded a bend onto a rocky trail, Suddenly, a rifle crack split the night behind them. Wood exploded off the wagon rail beside Clara, spraying splinters. She yelped and ducked. Ethan's heart thundered. The first shot had been fired, and they were still miles from safety. How much longer could they outrun the inevitable? They careened into Ethan's farmyard under a moonless sky. The wagon skidded to a halt as distant whoops from the Kincaid riders echoed off the canyon walls. The farm was dark and silent. Even the cattle in the pen stomped and snorted nervously, sensing danger on the wind. In the distance, thunderheads loomed, and a faint smell of ozone hinted at a storm brewing. Moments later, Pastor Abram rode up on his old mare, lantern in hand. He swung down from the saddle, determined to help the newlyweds stand their ground. "We'll hold them off till morning," he whispered, placing a trembling hand on Ethan's shoulder. If they could last till dawn, the circuit judge would arrive to uphold Clara's deed and marriage. The law could save them, but dawn was still hours away, and the clan was nearly at the gate. Inside the farmhouse, Ethan ushered Clara to crouch behind the thick oak table. She knelt there, clutching a Bible to her chest for courage. Outside, Ethan and Pastor Abram barred the windows and braced the front door with a heavy beam. Each slam of wood against wood echoed like a war drum in the quiet. From beyond the fence, a booming voice shattered the stillness. "Send out the girl, Ethan Cole. That lamb belongs to the Kincaids." Ethan's blood ran cold. He recognized that gravelly bellow. Uncle Matthias, the clan's ruthless patriarch. Peering through a gap in the shutters, Ethan saw at least a dozen torches bobbing outside. The Kincaid mob spreading out like wolves. Pastor Abram stepped onto the porch with his palms raised high. "This is sacred ground," he called out firmly. "No need for violence. The judge will settle this by sunrise." A gunshot rang out. The lantern in Abram's hand exploded, spraying glass and fire. The old preacher cried out and crumpled to the porch boards, blood blooming on his shoulder. Inside, Clara clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. Ethan's vision went red with fury. Matthias had spilled first blood on holy ground. Was diplomacy already doomed before the sun even rose? A triumphant howl went up from the clan outside. Thunder boomed overhead as heavy boots stomped onto the porch, hammering at the door. Ethan hauled Pastor Abram back inside, choking on the acrid stench of kerosene from the shattered lantern. Abram grimaced in pain, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Wood splintered as rifle butts smashed against the door. Ethan's hands shook. He had sworn never to kill again. Pastor Abram had helped him find God and hang up his guns after his outlaw days. But now the old man's blood was warm on Ethan's fingers, and something inside him snapped. With a snarl, he slammed the final bar across the door, then rushed to a corner cabinet. He tore it open, and the hinges creaked as he grabbed a shotgun and his old revolver, cold, familiar steel in his grip. Ethan whispered a quick prayer for forgiveness under his breath. Outside, Matthias Kincaid bellowed, "We'll burn you out like rats." As if on cue, a flaming bottle came crashing through the front window. It exploded against the wall, and the curtains whooshed into flames. Within seconds, the parlor was an inferno, and black smoke rolled through the house. Clara coughed, eyes watering from the burning oil fumes. They were out of time. The fire would consume the house long before dawn. "To the root cellar now," Ethan barked. Clara hurried to Pastor Abram, looping his good arm over her shoulders. Ethan snatched up the fallen Bible as he guided them toward the back kitchen. Behind them, the front door finally shattered. Men poured into the burning front room, their hulking shadows dancing in the firelight. Ethan yanked open the wooden hatch in the kitchen floor. He helped Clara lower the semi-conscious pastor down into the darkness below. The moment Clara's feet cleared the opening, Ethan heaved the hatch shut above their heads. Above, the mob ransacked his home amid the roaring flames. Trapped in the cramped root cellar, Ethan and Clara gasped as smoke seeped through the floorboards. Bullets thudded into the walls above. How long could they hold out in this choking darkness as the fire raged overhead? By the blackest hour before dawn, a fierce thunderstorm broke out. Rain hammered the smoking ruins of the farmhouse, hissing against embers and churning ash into mud. Through the slats of the cellar door, Ethan glimpsed lightning flashes splitting the sky. The downpour sent the Kincaid mob scattering for cover, granting the besieged trio a narrow chance. Pastor Abram groaned as a thunderclap jolted him awake. He winced and struggled upright with Clara's help. Outside, the clan was in disarray. Through the drumming rain, men shouted and stumbled through knee-deep mud. Over the chaos, Matthias's voice boomed, "Find them! The sun's coming up." He was desperate to finish this before daylight brought the law. Ethan pressed his eye to a gap in the hatch. In the strobing lightning, he saw silhouettes darting toward the barn. The storm had evened the odds. Rain doused the torches and soaked their gunpowder. In one bright flash, Ethan spotted Uncle Matthias wading through the muck with a shotgun, rage twisting his features. They had only minutes until the clan regrouped. Ethan's mind raced. He leaned close to Clara and Pastor Abram to make himself heard over the storm. "We'll take the tunnel out back to the creek bed," he shouted. "If we reach the road by sunrise, we might flag down the judge or the sheriff." It was a desperate plan, but their only shot. Clara squeezed Ethan's hand hard. "Together," she mouthed, her soot-streaked face resolute. Ethan nodded. A peal of thunder masked the sound as he heaved the cellar hatch open into the storm. Clutching Pastor Abram, Ethan led the way out into the torrential rain. Water lashed his face and soaked him to the bone in seconds. Clara climbed up after, half carrying the weakened pastor. The three of them slogged away from the ruins, each step sucking at their boots in the mire. Suddenly, a lightning bolt struck the old oak by the barn with a blinding crack. The great tree exploded and crashed down, sending Kincaid men scrambling in panic. The chaos was their chance. Ethan seized the moment, guiding Clara and Abram in a stumbling run toward the dry creek bed beyond the property line. Their hearts pounded with hope and dread. Had they truly escaped the Kincaid gauntlet? Or were they racing headlong into another ambush beyond the rain? Gray dawn crept over the drenched plains as Ethan, Clara, and Pastor Abram finally staggered onto the county road. The rain had dwindled to a light drizzle, leaving the sharp scent of wet sagebrush in the air. A lone rider waited in their path atop a restless horse, blocking the way. The stranger's long coat dripped with rain, and a rifle lay easy in his arms. Ethan squinted through the murky light. A jagged scar on the man's cheek caught the dawn's glow. Ethan's stomach dropped. It was Jed Blackjack Carver, his old partner in crime. Jed tipped his hat with a mocking smirk. "Howdy, Ethan. Long time," he drawled. Clara's hand gripped Ethan's sleeve. Jed's cold eyes swept over Clara and the injured pastor. "The Kincaids made me a fine offer to bring them the girl and her deed. Without you," he said, thumbing back the rifle's hammer. Ethan gently propped Pastor Abram against a rock and stepped forward, sheltering Clara behind him. "Jed, you don't have to do this," he called out over the patter of rain. "You and I rode together once. I saved your hide more times than I can count." Jed barked a short laugh. "And then you ran off to play hero while I rotted in jail," he snarled. His voice was rough with bitterness. Clara mustered her courage and stepped up beside Ethan. She fixed Jed with an icy stare. "You're not taking my land or my husband," she said firmly. Jed's lip curled. He raised the rifle, training it on her heart. Ethan's pulse pounded. Draw on Jed and risk Clara getting shot, or do nothing and let Jed kill them all. It was an impossible choice. Time seemed to slow as his fingers brushed the heavy watch in his coat. He drew out the old silver pocket watch and held it up. "You remember this, Jed?" Ethan asked, voice steady. Jed's eyes flicked to the timepiece. In a flash of recognition, he hesitated. Years ago, when they were as close as brothers, he had given Ethan that very watch as a token of loyalty. For a heartbeat, neither man moved. Jed's face hardened. "Loyalty don't mean a damn thing now," he growled. Without another word, he pulled the trigger. The rifle cracked like thunder. Clara screamed as Ethan recoiled, but the bullet never struck him. He stared down in disbelief at the pocket watch in his hand, now shattered. Jed's bullet was lodged dead center in its ruined gears. That old keepsake had stopped the shot meant for Ethan's heart. Jed's jaw dropped in shock. With a furious curse, he worked the lever to fire again. But Ethan was already moving. He lunged at Jed with an anguished roar. The second shot went wide as Ethan knocked the barrel aside and slammed into his old friend. They crashed to the muddy road, grappling in close quarters. Years of guilt and restraint gave way to raw fury. Ethan drove a fist into Jed's jaw, sending the gunman sprawling. In moments, Ethan pinned Jed to the ground and pressed his revolver to his former brother-in-arms. Jed glared up, defiant even in defeat. Mud and rainwater dripped off Ethan's hat brim. Ethan's hand trembled on the trigger. Jed had threatened everything he held dear. It would be so easy to end it here and now. His finger began to squeeze. "Ethan, don't." Clara's voice cut through the haze. She stood a few paces away, soaked and shivering, her wide eyes bleeding. Ethan's jaw tightened. If he killed Jed in cold blood, he'd be crossing a line he swore never to cross again. He would truly be the outlaw he once was. With a growl of effort, Ethan tore the gun away from Jed's head. Instead of a bullet, he delivered a hard crack with the pistol's butt. Jed groaned and went limp. Ethan rolled him over and bound his hands tight with a length of wet rope from Jed's saddle. The gunman cursed under his breath, but offered no further resistance. Mercy had won. Ethan would not become the monster his enemies expected. At that moment, the clatter of hooves echoed down the road. Through the lifting rain, a half-dozen riders approached at speed. The sheriff, the circuit judge, and a posse of deputies drawn by the night's gunfire. Clara choked back a sob of relief. Help had finally arrived. At the sight of the lawmen, the remaining Kincaid clan melted into the hills, dragging their wounded and vanishing into the gray morning. Ethan holstered his revolver and sagged with exhaustion. He slipped one arm around Clara and helped Pastor Abram with the other as they limped toward the sheriff. It was finally over at last. Or was it? The Kincaid mob melted away, leaving Clara's land safe. Ethan pocketed the shattered watch, knowing victory had come at a cost. As the sun rose, he wondered if the sins of his past would let them live in peace. Saddle up and subscribe for more Wild West tales of honor and redemption.